Hello everyone, welcome back to another session by Literary Feather. Today I'm going to introduce the poem Daddy by Sylvia Plath. First of all, let's go through the detailed analysis on the writer Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath was born on October 27, 1932 in Boston, Massachusetts. Her father was a college professor and her mother was a master's student who had taken a class from him. When Plath was 8, her father died, and this event played an important role in her writings. From childhood onwards, Plath was an exceptional student and writer. She entered Smith College on a full merit scholarship in 1950, and she served as a guest editor at Made Moiselle magazine in New York City in the summer of 1953. Despite of serious depression, suicide attempts and treatment in a mental health facility, she graduated from Smith College with highest honors in 1955. It is in 1955 that Plath traveled to England on a Fulbright scholarship with a grant to write a novel, and in England she met and married the British poet Ted Hughes and launched her own career as a poet, working on The Bell Jar, her only novel, at intervals. Plath and Hughes moved to the United States in 1957, and there Plath studied with Robert Lowell Jr., an acclaimed poet known for his confessional verse, which focuses on the personal and often contain a first-person speaker. Plath and Hughes later returned to England, and her first collection of poems, Colossus, was published in 1960. Like Lowell, she wrote poetry that was confessional and autobiographical in nature. When Plath submitted The Bell Jar to American publisher Harper and Row in 1962, the editors dismissed it as immature and overly emotional. At last, The Bell Jar was published in England on January 14, 1963, under the pseudonym Victoria Lucas, and early reviews were indifferent. The years leading up to the book's publication were difficult. Plath gave birth to 2 children, and Hughes left her for another woman. Plath spent her time with her children, who were often sick, in a chilly flat with no telephone. She was in desperate financial straits, seriously depressed, and struggling to finish her second poetry collection, which included the poem Daddy. On February 11, 1963, Plath was found with her head in the oven, dead of carbon monoxide poisoning. The children were asleep in a sealed-off bedroom, and she was 30 years old at the time of death. Let's look at the relevance of the title, Daddy. The poem Daddy addresses the speaker's father directly, and her relationship with her deceased father is the main focus of the poem. She describes her father as a Nazi, a giant statue, a confining shoe, and a vampire, recounting her long struggle to be free of his destructive presence in her life. Moving to the genre of the poem, like most of Sylvia Plath's poetry, Daddy is also a confessional poem. Confessional poetry puts the most personal and intimate feelings and relationships into verse. It often uses the first person and tackles subjects that have not been previously considered poetic, such as depression and psychological trauma. However, confessional poets do not just write their feelings on paper, they employ poetic techniques such as rhyme, figurative language, alliteration, and meter, not just to talk about the feelings and inner world of the speaker, but to evoke this phenomena. In the poem Daddy, Plath uses the images of vampires, Nazis, the Holocaust, and the grave to explore the relationship of the speaker with her deceased father. The poem itself is 16 stanzas long, and each stanza is 5 lines or 1 cinquain. Although this suggests a form, the poem is in free verse. It has no set meter or rhyme scheme. I am including the full text of the poem Daddy in the coming slides. As I said earlier, it is pretty long with 16 stanzas. Now, let's go through the detailed summary of the poem Daddy. In the first stanza, the speaker addresses her father directly, comparing him to a black shoe she has been confined inside like a foot for 30 years. The speaker says that she has not even dared to breathe or sneeze inside the shoe. Moving to the second stanza, the speaker tells Daddy that she had to kill him, but he died before she could do it. She describes him as being as heavy as marble, godlike, which means a bag full of God, and a larger than life statue. The statue image in stanza 2 continues as the speaker describes the head of the statue as if it rises from the Atlantic Ocean in the beginning of the third stanza. The waters of the ocean appear green and blue near the shore of Nauset, Massachusetts. The speaker says it was at Nauset she prayed for his return. The speaker refers to her father's use of German language despite his birth in Poland, then describes how the Polish town was destroyed by wars in the fourth stanza. She also noted that the name of the Polish town of his birth was common. Stanza 5 is the continuation of the third from stanza 4. Here, the speaker says that there were a dozen or two towns of the same name. So, she never really knew where her father was actually born. This has made her feel unable to connect or even speak with him. The difficulty of talking with her father continues to be described in the sixth stanza. The speaker says that her tongue seemed as if it was stuck in a snare, and all she could stutter out was itch, 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 itch. Itch is the German word for eye. She also says that she thought every German was her father, and she characterizes his language as obscene. In stanza 7, the speaker compares herself to a Jew during the Holocaust. Her father's German language was an engine carrying her to a concentration camp such as Dachau, Auschwitz, or Belsen. She describes how being treated like a Jew makes her speak like a Jew and even become one. The speaker presents the image of purity, another reference to the Nazis, such as the snow of the Tyrolean Alps and the clear beer of Vienna in the 8th stanza. Then she says that these are not really very pure, just as she is not really of pure ancestry. She describes herself as having gypsy ancestry and carrying a tarot card deck. Tarot card deck is used for telling fortunes. Then she circles back to identifying herself as a bit of a Jew, recalling the words of the previous stanza. The speaker continues to characterize her relationship with her daddy as one of the fear in the stanza 9 by saying that she has always been afraid of him. The images of her father are predominantly those of a Nazi, Luftwaffe, which is a branch of the German military. Another one is an Aryan eye, which refers to the bright blue color. And next one is Panzer, which means a German soldier in a tank. In stanza 10, the speaker describes her father as a swastika or Nazi symbol, the blackness of which was like dark clouds blocking any sight of the sky beyond. She states that every woman adores a fascist by suggesting the conflicting emotions of love and fear of her father and perhaps men in general. The speaker describes how in a photograph her father is standing at a blackboard in the 11th stanza. He has a cleft chin. She says even though the cleft was in his chin, not his foot, he was still a devil or a black man. The speaker continues to discuss the image introduced at the end of stanza 11 by saying that the black man bit her heart into two. Then she returns to the topic of her father's death when she was a child and how at 20 she tried to die so she could join him. In stanza 13, the speaker says that After she successfully attempted suicide, she was given medical and mental health treatment. However, this gave her ideas for other ways to harm herself, like replacing her father with another man who would be just as hurtful. The speaker continues to describe the man who became the replacement of her father in stanza 14 by saying that he loves torture. She married him, so now she is finally done trying to communicate with or get to know her dead and buried father. Stanza 15 says that finally she was able to murder the memory and influence of her father, and she also says that this means she can also kill her father's replacement, which is the man she married. She characterizes this man as a vampire who drank her blood for 7 years. She tells her father she can lie back now, which means lie down instead of actively controlling her life. Stanza 16 continues with the image of a father lying back and now describing him as a vampire with a stake through its heart. And she is not the only one who has been released from his tyranny. The villagers also rejoice, dancing and stamping on his corpse. The poem ends with an empathetic line that, "Daddy, you bastard, I'm through." Next, let's analyze the form and sound effects used in the poem. The poem Daddy is made up of 16 quatrains or 5-line stanzas. It has a formal look, but it is in free verse with no regular meter or rhyme schemes. Its rhythms at times evokes nursery rhymes or simple children's songs. For instance, the line you do not do resembles the nursery rhymes. A large number of lines end with the oo sound, like in do, shoe, blue, you, to, root, glue, screw, etc. This brings out the childish nature of the speaker's voice, as if she is a winning or pleading child or even an infant soothing herself by sucking. There is playfulness to some of the rhymes, such as in bean and green, that brings out the poem's childishness. Sylvia Plath uses other sound devices in the poem to connect the poem's words with the senses of sound and touch. Alliteration of B sounds in stanza 12 emphasizes the words bit, buried, and bonds, which bring out the violence and death in these images. Several lines are onomatopoeic and they imitate the sound of what they describe. For example, the lines an engine, chuffing me off like a Jew use rhythmic repetition and repeated first sounds to evoke the sound of a train moving down the tracks. Next subtopic is diction and tone. Throughout the poem, the speaker's diction is simple and direct, and in some places it is childish. There are only a handful of words that are longer than 2 syllables, like villages, swastika, together, finally, telephone, beautiful, and recover. This simple diction reinforces the sense, and though the speaker is now an adult, she still relates to her father as a child does to a parent. She is stuck in a childhood stage of emotional development, which is part of the entrapment she feels. This childlike tone is reinforced by the sing-song nursery rhyme quality of the verse and by its rather winning repetition of O sound. The tone of the poem morphs and escalates as the poem progresses. It begins with a straightforward, even scolding tone. Although the content of the poem is still about needing to murder the father, the tone is sad and in some places almost nostalgic. We can see that in the line, green over blue and beautiful knows it. The tone becomes more intense as the imagery becomes more violent. Introducing the images of Narcissus, barbed wire fences, the devil, and vampires escalates the emotional content of the poem. Let's move on to the symbols used in this poem. First symbol is the image of foot and shoe. Throughout the poem, the speaker uses recurring references to feet and shoes or boots to describe her relationship with her father. The interpretation of these images shifts, representing the complex emotions the speaker feels towards her father. She feels resentment and anger for keeping her confined, mixed with a lifelong longing to know and connect with him. In addition to this, the symbol of foot and shoe also add an underlying sexual undertone to the speaker's feelings about her father. Freud maintained the foot as a phallic symbol, specifically the phallus of a mother. He suggested that male children believe that their mothers have phalluses before learning women do not have them. For this reason, Freud believed men often develop fetishes about feet and foot coverings. The poem opens with the image of a pale foot trapped inside a black shoe. In this metaphor, the foot is the poem speaker and the black shoe is her father. Her father's presence in her life, even though he is long dead, has made a confining and constraining effect. The boot in stanza 10 has a similar interpretation. However, the boot is that of a fascist kicking a woman in the face. Boots and shoes share the sense of being tools of captivity and oppression. In the second stanza, the foot belongs to a statue of the speaker's father. It has a gigantic great toe. This reference is tied to Plath's own father, who had an infected toe due to the diabetes that would eventually kill him. However, it also suggests another Freudian meaning, that is, an Oedipus complex. The name Oedipus literally means swollen foot. A person with an Oedipus complex has a romantic or sexual attraction to the parent of the opposite gender. Later, the term Electra complex came to be used for the female version of an Oedipus complex. Here, the symbol is one of the aberrant sexual attachment between the child and the parent. Finally, in the stanza 5, the speaker refers to the father's foot as a connection to the ground, the town in which he was born. The foot connects to the ground in a childhood home, just as a tree puts down roots, and this is another image in the stanza. This use represents the speaker's longing to connect with her father. Another symbol used in this poem is the imagery of Nazis. The use of Nazi and Holocaust imagery in the poem is uncomfortable for many readers since Plath's father was not a Nazi and she was not Jewish. Yet, in this poem, as well as in others, Plath uses Nazis as symbols of oppressors and Jews as the ultimate symbol of victimhood. In this particular poem, the speaker begins to introduce the Nazi symbolism in stanza 7 as she says she is like a Jew being taken by train to a concentration camp. She suggests being treated like a Jew or victim made her speak like that and then become one. In the following stanzas, she uses this extended metaphor of her father as a Nazi and herself as his victim, both as a Jew and as a gypsy, which is another group of Nazis persecuted. The introduction of the Nazi symbol of a swastika in the lines, "So black no sky could squeak through," combines this Nazi symbolism with the death symbolism of the color black. Another prominent imagery or symbol in the poem is the color black. Black is often used as a symbol of death, gloom, or evil, and this poem is no exception. Throughout the poem, the color black is used to create a dark, oppressive mood. It consistently represents the oppression the speaker feels, which is inextricably tied to her obsession with death and the grave. In stanza 1, the father is described as a black shoe that keeps the speaker confined. The black swastika in stanza 10 is an oppressive, looming presence, so black itself blocks all of the light from the sky. The boot in this same stanza is not explicitly said to be black, but the Nazi uniform included black boots. In stanzas 11 and 12, there is a reference to a black man in the lines, "Bit my pretty red heart in two," and this is an image that seems to refer her father. It also prefigures the model she made of her father at the end of the stanza 13, who is also described as a man in black. In stanza 14, the telephone is black. The black telephone represents the speaker's connection to her dead father, which has made her life torturous and confined her psychologically and emotionally. Finally, in the final stanza, the speaker describes her father as having a fat black heart. She has driven a stake through it has once stakes a vampire. This symbolically suggests the speaker has put an end to the influence of oppression, death, and fear in her life. Next one is the symbol of the vampire. Vampires are, according to legend, undead beings who must drink the blood of the living in order to exist. This image is appropriate for a poem about needing to kill someone who is already dead. Yet, the vampire image in the poem is applied to two men, not only to the one who is literally dead, but also in the final two stanzas of the poem. The speaker speaks of a vampire who drank my blood off, these are the lines in the poem, for 7 years. This is a reference to her husband, the man she loved as a model of her father and who became a substitute for her father. This suggests not that he is dead, but it suggests that he fed off her life. But the vampire is soon transformed into her father as she describes Daddy lying back with a stake through his heart. This killing of the father who died years ago but who controls her life regardless is the main concern of the poem. However, the dual use of the vampire symbol shows an intertwining of the two male figures in the poem. First one is her father and the second one is her own husband. Thus, it suggests a more general indictment of men as oppressors and as vampires who feed off of the women they oppress. Let's go through various themes discussed in the poem. First one is freedom and captivity. We already said that the poem Daddy is about the oppressive presence of the speaker's father in her life. Although he is long dead, she has lived as though trapped by her feelings about him and the person he has made her even in his absence. She feels that she must kill him again. Here, killing refers to the destroyal of the influence he has over her life in order to be free from all his influences. The nature of her oppression is illustrated by the images she chooses to describe him. She said that he is like a shoe that confines a foot, an enormous statue that towers over her life. He is also described as a Nazi sending Jews to their deaths and calling for a racial purity that doesn't exist. Another one is a fascist kicking his woman in the face with a boot. The speaker is also held captive by her desire for connection with him, which she was denied because of his death. She longs to know which of many similarly named towns she was born in. She prays for him to come back to her. Moreover, the speaker can see her choices in a lover and husband has been dictated by her complex feelings about her father. She can't escape her father because the man she married is a model of her daddy and he too hurts her irreparably. Then the speaker kills him with a stake through his black heart, spurring a celebration filled with dancing and stamping on his corpse. This declaration is spoken in a tone of defiance, but the strong emotions of the final stanza leave the reader wondering if the speaker is truly free. Next theme is death. Death is a pervasive presence in the poem. The speaker's father's death occurred when she was just a child and before she was able to work through her childhood conception of him as God. He died while he was still a larger than life presence, godlike and massive. This left her with unresolved emotions that then shaped her life and relationships in healthy ways. The poem suggests that she felt distant from him even before he died. The lines, I never could talk to you, and another one, the tongue stuck in my jaw, refers that she maintained or she felt distance from him. This lack of communication before his death and which continued after his death adds to the sense of unresolved feelings and her desire to find resolution. Her attempts at resolution included joining him in death. The line, at 20, I tried to die and another one, and get back, back, back to you refers the same. There are a variety of images in the poem that develop this theme, including concentration camps, the destruction of war, and vampires. The grave and corpse imagery also adds to the general sense of mortality. In stanza 2, the speaker describes her father as marble heavy and a ghastly statue, which are the images of cold stone and mausoleums. The back images in stanza 2 and stanza 13 are evoking the heaviness of a corpse zipped into a body bag. A vampire is of course a dead man who walks and speaks and must drink the blood of the living in order to continue to do so. Because her father, although dead, had such an active presence in her life, and he must be considered undead too. The final image of villagers dancing and stamping on the dead corpse of her father is a macabre end to a poem about killing the undead. The last theme is women and men. For the most part, the poem is about one woman and two men. The speaker's relationship with her father is the main focus of the poem. Still, it also explores his undead influence on her life by bringing in another man, that is, her husband. The speaker clearly connects her father's effect on her life with the facts that she married a man who was a model of him. Both men in the poem have harmful effects on the speaker, and both are characterized as vampires and as people who love torture and cause violence and death. Both would boot you in the face even after you have expressed your devotion and love. This is the reference to the both men. There are hints that the speaker extends her sense of men's effect on women beyond just these particular relationships. The Holocaust imagery suggests a system of oppression and violence, not just an individual case. The line, "Every woman adores a fascist," suggests a universal observation the speaker makes about women and men in general. The final stanza involves not just the speaker dancing around the dead body of her father, but a whole village of people liberated by his death. These hints suggest that the speaker feels her father and husband as the representative of men in general or of a certain type of man. They may even represent the patriarchal system that gives them power over women. That's all about the themes in the poem. The names Otto Plath and Ted Hughes are another important things in the poem. Sylvia Plath's father, Otto Plath, was born in a Polish town in Germany. He was known as a strict parent. He was diagnosed with diabetes after an infection in his foot failed to heal, but the disease had already taken its toll. He died of complications from diabetes when Sylvia Plath was only 8 years old. Young Sylvia was traumatized by this event and its effect stayed with her throughout her life. It is the harmful influence of his formative and traumatic relationship that Daddy seeks to root out and destroy. It metaphorically kills the father whose death comes too early for his daughter to be free of his devastating effect on her life. However, there is a secondary figure in the poem, which is the model of her father, who was a man in black with a Mein Kampf look. The secondary figure is likely based on the poet's husband, Ted Hughes, to whom she was married for almost 6 years. This poem was written in the months preceding the poet's suicide in February 1963, though it was published posthumously in Ariel. By this time, Plath has discovered Hughes' affair and was living alone with her children. She was heartbroken by his infidelity and overwhelmed by the cold winter and the task of single parenting. So, while the poem focuses on the speaker's relationship with her father, its anger is fueled in part by anger at an unfaithful husband. These are the major informations you should know about Ted Hughes, her husband, and Otto Plath, her father. So that's all about the poem Daddy by Sylvia Plath.